Yeah, I wouldn't, but I was kind of worried about that.
But I'm seeing.
All right, the food is smelling so good. What can I say? We got to get started here. We've got, how many people have to leave out of here for a 1 o'clock class? Got one, two people. The rest we booked. We try to front load this, realizing there's going to be some people that conflict. But this will go to 1:32. Go a couple hours. If you want to stick around. I want to thank Lisa Litherland, David Hellman from CDW. Your IOT business architect. Yes. And this is your IOT really design or engineering?
Pure of Lisa, I focus more on commercial business.
Okay. So we talk about IoT, and I actually mentioned this to somebody, and they said, "What the heck's IoT?" And that's Internet of Things, so that's devices out on the edge. Whereas my wife likes to say, "Dance like your microwave is not watching," right? So so things now that we can put out there. Sensors is something that we've not had enough of really in animal sciences and what you're doing. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring someone in. CDW is our vendor on campus, sells us. Bryce, good to see you.
Good to see you.
This is our student rep for CDW here. Anyway, they are the ones who are selling us our HP laptops at first, but they have a whole portfolio of lots of just technology and devices and solutions for us. So we invited them on campus to really discuss. I thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss this topic. She's got a slide deck to go through. There's questions. I think this is maybe a start. Maybe you find some value in contacting and discussing with them later. We can certainly provide that, facilitate that, provide information or contact or any questions. And hopefully we get some really good information out of this. Nothing else, you get a good lunch out of it. So without further ado, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon. It is 5 minutes past. We got that determined a couple minutes ago. So welcome. So far, what is the best food in the spread over there that I need to definitely stand?
Cobbler.
Okay. All right. Hands down, it's the cobbler. Done. Problem. We'll just jump right in here. Again, my name is Lisa Litherland, and we're over here is David. We're part of CDW's IoT team. CDW invested in this group to help our customers transform the way that they operate. And whether that's colleges and universities changing the way that they operate, or if we get down to the end users and customers, which in this case would be our farmers, helping them transform the way they do business. So our agenda today, I'll talk a little bit about what is IoT. There's another term out there called digital transformation. Talk about what that is and what the difference is. I'll go through specific agricultural use cases. Many use cases out there for IoT. We'll focus on ones that I think you'll find relevant, and then we'll talk about how can we start to implement some of those in the real world. So we'll jump right in. So it is a whole new connected world, and I've got a whole bunch of numbers up here, an idea of why IoT is making such a. So there are 50 billion with a B connected devices that are expected to be on the network by the year 20. So that's a lot of things that will be connected. Economic impact of this space will be somewhere between 11 and 40 billion dollars in the next 10 years. So as you think about this, and look at just the industry of businesses, of farmers, and other businesses spending money in the future, there's a lot of dollars that are going toward IoT technologies. And then 75% of customers, organizations, businesses are already starting to implement some type of IoT technologies. And that may be with a pilot program, just rolling out some initial technologies to try things, maybe full-scale implementations, or maybe they're just doing some research. And that's what we talked about today is starting the conversation, starting to do some research, and look at what makes sense to get started with. So IoT and digital transformation are two terms that people tend to use interchangeably, but there is a difference between the two. So let's define those because I think it's always helpful to have some definitions to work with. So IoT, Internet of Things. We can define that as connecting things that were previously unconnected, so connecting them to the network. We can also define that as the convergence between IT, which is information technology, and OT, which is operational technology, and bringing those two pieces together. Traditionally, IT and OT have operated kind of in their own worlds, but really what we're doing with IoT is bringing those two together. Okay? So when we start connecting things to the network, those things send data. Right? We can collect data from sensors, and the question is, what are we going to do with that data? That data, to run analytics on it and gain insights into what is going on in our operations, and then change the decisions that we're making, change the way that we're running our business based off of that additional data that we had that we didn't have before. So again, IoT, connecting things that were previously unconnected, and then the digital transformation. What do we do with that data, and how do we use that information to change the way that we operate? So, great, we understand what it is, but why is it important? So here are just some numbers, again, to give you an idea of how this is making an impact in industry. So if we look at the rewards, the organizations that are already moving to IoT and are already rolling out this type of technology are already seeing rewards from those rollouts. So you can see, and this is across industries, increased customer response, improved use of the assets that they have, whether that's vehicles or IT equipment, or it could be other equipment that they use in operational space. This one right here, I really like, is that 35% is additional information for analytics. So again, keep in mind that with IoT, we're getting more. You can see these early adopters are already seeing rewards based off of rolling out IoT technology. The risks, however, of not moving, very great. I like this quote here. If you don't innovate fast, disrupt your industry, disrupt yourself, you'll be left behind. So a couple of numbers that we've got up here. 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies be gone in 10 years. And so you see this, you think about some of the great companies that were out there. Look at Sears, for example, used to be a very large company. Sure. All right, just double checking. Blockbuster, so there's a lot of companies that were big names back in their day, but they didn't innovate, they didn't disrupt the way their business was operating, they didn't change with the times, and they're no longer around. So some other things to know is that energy and other costs are continuing to go up. Those costs continue to go up, so organizations need to look for ways to drive costs down. People, whether it's end customers or all of us, we expect greater service in real time. We live by our phones. We expect real-time information all the time on pretty much everything in our lives, right? We expect to get it right now. This is another one. It's a crazy world out there. Increased terrorism and active shooter events. I mean, they're happening all over the place. And so with IOT, the legacy video surveillance systems, big purposes, so we can find out what happened after it already happened. And now there's technology out there that can help us mitigate the damage that's done when those bad things happen. So this is rewards and risks to highlight, why it's so important for working with IoT now and not. So that was our introduction to IoT. You're all interested in agriculture, so let's talk about some use cases that really matter to you and how we can use this in your space. This is one of my favorites. So we got our connected cow here. So you may remember something called mad cow disease. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Anyone not comatose from the peach cobbler? So mad cow disease just traumatized meat and dairy industry several years ago. And so there's a company in the UK. What they did was they designed a sensor for the cows. This is kind of like a Fitbit for cows, right? Stay with me here, all right? You see where I'm going. So what they did was they put these sensors on the cows so they could get information like temperature, location information, heart rate, all kinds of biometric data from the cow. And this information cloud, and if one of those readings is out of specification, out of the normal operating specifications, the cow farmer or herder or rancher can get a notification on their smartphone that something's going on. So let's say we've got a cow. We'll call her Daisy. All right. So Daisy's running a fever. All right. The sensor that Daisy's wearing senses that she has a temperature of 104. Don't know the normal operating specifications of cows. I know you're all much smarter in that than I am, but say she's got a fever of 104. That information is fed to the cloud. The analytics notice that she's outside the normal operating temperature metrics, and I get an alert that Daisy has a fever. So now what I can do is I can go to Daisy, get her the medical care that she needs, and take care of her and nurse her back to health so that healthy again, and also so she doesn't get the other cows in the herd. So when you think about it, it's kind of, it seems like a simple application, but now instead of just looking at the cows and trying to figure out like, are they healthy, are they not, I'm getting alert notifications when one of my cows is sick, so I can take care of that cow, get them healthy.
That's a use case that we have identified. What about the device, that sort of thing? Talk to me a little bit about what the devices are, how, it's kind of the strategy or how you pull that together and actually, how do you implement
The
that sort
actual
of a thing?
technology.
How do you do that?
So I mean, it's literally like a Fitbit for the cows. It doesn't go around the belly like it is here. It actually attaches to the leg of the cow. I forget who makes it. I think it's something like Moo Tech. I'm serious. It's like Moo Tech. And it actually fits on it.
Based on Boulder?
Yeah.
No. So I mean, it's just like a Fitbit for a cow.
Okay.
So, and I mean, we could get into, or we could like dig into the actual product and all of that. I don't have that prepared for you today, but we can absolutely dig into the technology for you.
Are there other products like that, do you know, or?
There may be other vendors that make it. So I mean, we could research what the different vendors are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So this slide just highlights some of the different sensors and applications. A lot of different sensors out there. When we think about IoT, and we're gathering data from the physical world, putting it onto the network. So we could do things like weight measurement. That could be weight measurement, moisture content. That could be of the feed or moisture content of the soil. Temperature sensors, humidity, so we can see what the humidity content is. There's location sensors, so real-time location services. In the past, a lot of the sensors that were out there did have delays on them, but now the sensor technology for location that's out there, really real-time. What we're seeing is a lot of it updates every seconds or less. So it really is real-time, and you can see we've seen it on things like vehicle tracking, where you can actually see the vehicle moving. So it's real time.
So what do they use? I mean, we can barely get internet in Wellington. What is the mechanism of, what system do we use to capture this? I mean, is it wireless? Is it satellite? What is it?
So I'll jump in and I'll try to address both questions kind of real quick. So I think if you look at the sensor space, one reason we sort of don't have the answers of, hey, here are all the individual sensors, is that there's bigger trends within IT, which is that computation costs have come down dramatically, the sort of form factor that we can put these sensors in. They've almost become extremely commoditized. So think very inexpensive, maybe $30, $40 sensors. It doesn't make sense for us as sort of an IT organization to go out and hunt down each one of those sensors, right? It's really the back end kind of architectural pieces. So I think the way to think about this, as you're sort of approaching your business is those ideations of sort of instrumenting the physical world. Think about your senses a bit, right? What can you taste? What can you see? What can you hear? And really, you can quickly put together sensors based on the function that you're wanting. And quickly kind of, pull together all the technical pieces to make that happen. So that's maybe to address a little bit of kind of that sensor space. We don't focus on them so much as we focus on the back-end infrastructure, the analytics that make this to sort of drive the value out of the data that's collected in these environments versus the thousands and thousands of manufacturers that are putting different sensor types together. I think there's some slides to address your question a little later. But we see sort of a bunch of different pieces. There's kind of emerging connectivity, both licensed and unlicensed spectrum, Sigfox, LoRa. These are kind of emerging, long range, getting out into these open spaces that can kind of connect to these devices, whether it's cellular based or sort of private mesh networks. There's kind of a bunch of kind of technical IT terms, but there's that's been some of that innovation, is new emerging protocols to reach further cover more area than sort of traditional enterprise spaces, which are fixed like this building. It's easy to sort of cover this in Wi-Fi. You can't do that out in a crop field. So there's some technology we can kind of talk about this. So again, against this sort of the sensors out here, this was just kind of some things that we thought might have been interest, is kind of spur some ideas, but really the possibilities are kind of approaching endless, right? Anything that you can sort of connect, chemical analysis, CO2 sensors, things like that, we see that just a whole plethora of kind of the sensor space. And then that sort of a connectivity layer just kind of bubbles that up into these different, AI, machine learning platforms that we support. Hopefully that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we absolutely will get kind of into some of those protocols a little further on. The other piece that David kind of highlighted is, we're kind of talking about the sensor piece now. It's kind of the IoT space again. And when we get into the digital transformation, we'll start talking about, what are the platforms? What do we do with that data that we're collecting? And how do we use that to change the way that running the business? So on the location piece, the other piece that's highlighted there is geofencing technology. So that's where you can designate a specific area. So in this case, we could potentially set up geofencing for location tracking, so say for a herd, if they get outside the area that they're supposed to be in, set up with alerts, so you know that. Press that and chase them down. Fluid flow rates, so that's to kind of, if you've got running water or other fluids, you can track, how is that flowing. That can also give you an idea of what temperature that's operating at, if it's not water that's frozen. pH levels, vibration and shock, and then we've got water, air, gas, energy, and steam. So again, this is just different types of sensors that are out there. As David mentioned, there are all kinds of sensors already out there, and there are all kinds right now. So this is a very quick moving market. So do try to keep tabs on some of what's going on as far as what's out there. But really, it's just a matter of what are we trying? What kind of information are we trying to get? What's the end outcome that you're trying to achieve? And then we'll go figure out what are the pieces to put that. So as far as applications go for some of these sensors, again, these are just some ideas to get you started. Things like the feed management, what's the soil quality? So dry, is it moist enough? Irrigation monitoring, we can talk about production forecasting. So if soil is at certain levels, we know that it's going to be richer and produce a better crop versus have that moisture in it. Remote equipment monitoring, so that can be either viewing equipment from afar, or it can also be gaining information about the equipment health. So there's now telemetric data is something that's out there. Yeah, telemetric. I might geek out a little too much. Let me know if I need to reel back in. But what that is we can put sensors on different equipment, gain information from that equipment. Things like, I have a slide on this later, things out level hours has the engine run, what kind of health the equipment's in, if it the maintenance we can also then get into predictive maintenance on the equipment. You can recognize when a problem is going to happen or when you think there's going to be a problem versus waiting until it fails and then doing something. Predictive crop and livestock production kind of ties back with the forecasting health. Based off of that. And then also just real-time monitoring. So here's one specific challenge that Ed brought up when we talked beforehand is finding out whether there's water present at a specific area, and if it's there, is it frozen or not frozen? So right now that's something where you might have people getting in a truck, driving for 8 hours to go put their eyes on it in person to find out, oh, yeah, it's frozen, or no, we've got water there. And that's something that's very labor intensive because you've got people driving those locations instead of their work. And it could be potentially dangerous if rough roads. That could be a dangerous situation that's going out. So a couple of different technologies that are out there that can help solve this challenge are things like video surveillance. So with networked video cameras, instead of having the video feed just fed to storage on site, it can be fed to the network where it can be accessed from anywhere. And then what's going on, you can actually visually inspect whether that location has that water or not. Another big thing that we're seeing a lot of are the use of drones. So you can actually fly the drones out. If you think there's a problem area, you can fly the drone out and have a video camera attached to it. So you can have fixed cameras, you can have drones with cameras, and when we get into some of those benefits, I mean, just as far as ease of management, this is something where, again, someone doesn't have to spend all day driving to find out if there's water out there, if it's available for livestock. You can have one person monitor multiple locations. If they're driving to that location physically, they can only go to so many places. You can only drive so many places in one day. Of time. But with this technology, now you can have that visibility for multiple locations, and that also drives cost efficiencies because one person can monitor those multiple. The other pieces around the safety.
Again, on the implementation of something like this, I mean, we're looking at, and I'm looking at for our college, kind of a cloud strategy, and we're looking at applications really driving initially some of that strategy rather than just dumping up there or whatever it is. I mean, it sounds like this is, again, ripe for something along that line. We're talking about the connectivity issues that Bob had just brought up. I mean, you get a remote camera out in the middle of in a canyon that just has little network connectivity. Is that the appropriate tool to use for that? Is drone the appropriate thing? What kinds of things? I mean, what are the limitations to the drones? What's the, I mean, how many miles can they go? What do we have to worry about?
So battery is probably the largest sort of limiter of drones. But if we kind of circle back into video, maybe talk about some active sort of projects that we've been working on recently.
That would help. That'd be great.
So we were piloting sort of a drone-based system used video analytics to identify the color of the field. Right. So basically is the I can't remember if it was wheat or whatnot, but is it green or is it brown, and is that changing over time? Basically, what they're leveraging is drones that fly over the crop fields, take pictures, and then run that through an analytic platform. We kind of talked about through the connectivity piece, but run it through an analytic platform to identify color change over time. So if they're in the same spot, take the same picture against their kind of irrigation processes and how that sort of drives in there. In that case, the connectivity is kind of localized within that field because it's kind of a pilot, but these drones fly themselves now with machine learning and AI. They interact with each other. You can have multiple in the field at once. They're covering a different area. Maybe they're tracking different motions. Kind of connectivity depends back to that earlier question, right? So from a camera perspective, you see everything from using LTE to provide sort of disparate connectivity to some emerging protocols that we're seeing. Once we have, that's the biggest challenge, is kind of identifying what of the many kind of emerging connectivities. Basically, us enterprise guys had to worry about wired and wireless, right? There was kind of two modes. Now there's, the last I checked, about 40 different kind of connectivity, some near field, RFID, a bunch of different. Yeah. So
just so happens.
So there's a plethora of stuff between like 5G sort of high capacity things that may make sense for like video camera systems, kind of at the top of that spectrum, to really kind of the bleeding edge, which is low power WAN. So think battery powered devices that can transmit over 5-mile radius. And then kind of a subset of that is LTE-M. It's LTE based, but it's specifically sort of geared to ramp up and ramp down. It's not always on cellular, so when it has data, it kind of collects it, turns the radio on, transmits the data, turns itself off. Those are, again, you cover a 5-mile radius with one radio. You leverage 2 or 3 of those, and that it gets back to kind of the RTLS component of this, which is we can do triangulation of that signal. So back to Daisy and her necklace or her wristband, right? So if we have a LoRa-enabled device out there that's providing some of that telemetry data back about health and location and whatnot, then we can sort of extrapolate that out of that environment, move that into cloud platforms. It can be on-premise as well. Everybody from Google to IBM to Microsoft are sort of kicking out different machine learning data sets and AI.
And it sounds like, there's a bit of a trade-off, and I don't want to take away
No,
time.
go ahead.
We talk about video requires high bandwidth, but the water, this obviously you don't need that video. You just need some sort of a sensor that probably can just be with a fairly rudimentary sensor that will be able to transport small amounts of data. It's just really binary, yes or no.
Yeah, so there's that sound of yes, no, which is kind of perfectly suited for LoRa, which is long range, low throughput. But we're also seeing, in that same sort of mega trends within technology, that computation has gotten so inexpensive that now there's the concept of edge processing. So now what we have embedded.
So you mean processing all the way out?
All the way out the edge. So on the camera,
yeah.
Let's say, right? So on this camera, instead of sending all that data up into a cloud platform, or worry about some of this connectivity, is we can just look at differentiation at that local piece. So it may be sort of aggregating data. Let's say it's temperature data. We sort of need to roll up every second's worth of data, but we want to see sort of analysis. Aggregate that over different time sets, data set periods, and then move that. So that kind of drives into some of that efficiency of it. And then the analytics is, again, if it's a video camera, maybe we don't care about 90% of it. Motion detected or some variable that we may be collecting. And we see cameras used for people counting in retail. You could absolutely use it for, counting herds, right? How many people are in this picture? How many cows or whatever is in the time period? Or are they crossing through certain thresholds within the environment? I'm not going to pretend to act like I know agriculture, right? But I'm sure movement of herds in different places is valuable data. But pulling all that together. answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I think David covered most of this, but a couple key things to note about some of these different technologies that are out there is that they can be used over very long distances, up to 5 miles. The other key piece is that because of what they're sending and the range they're operating in, they have extended battery life. So this wouldn't work if you had to change the batteries every 3 months or every 6 months, or you had to charge it once a week. That just doesn't work in this type of application. So those are a couple other.
And we're kind of seeing like that 3 to 5 year, again, it's on kind of sample interval, how much data, how frequently you're sending that kind of drives that battery conversation. But that's the kind of, if you want to get a sense of what that can look.
All right, so another thing that Ed mentioned was farm to table, or I've got dock to dish here with my connected fish. David might actually have been the artist.
I get goofy with
So-
graphics, so I apologize.
He's the artistic one. So, so IoT technology can be used to, trace fish moves from where it's at, whether it's Daisy in the field with her location tracker to, the slaughterhouses. We can add things like RFID tags to packaging, track that meat coming from that particular location, track it all the way to the restaurant.
I got a quick question for
Go
that.
ahead.
Are you guys familiar with FISMA requirements around cold storage of finished food product? The concept you guys. So there's federal mandates that are coming down that are kind of driving for all of our benefit, sort of driving, making sure that the health of our food that we eat is, that the food that we're eating is healthy. Right, so there's federal regulations now that we have to monitor the temperature of finished food product from manufacturer, slaughterhouse, all the way to distribution, warehousing, to the retail store, all the way to your plate, essentially. So with that, we see that sort of impacting our supply chain management and storage, right? How do we sort of collect this? How do we work in kind of business to business as that data is kind of through that manufacturing process, the distribution sort of outlet, warehousing, all the way to retail, right? There's a lot of data that kind of needs to be starts at the farmers.
Yeah, so what this can provide is, additional data about where the food, where the meat is traveling. It can help with forecasting and planning. Once animals leave the farm, and then another piece here. There's a lot of social interest in finding out where is my food coming from. And that can help some of the smaller farmers, because people are interested. A lot of interest around free-range eggs, for example. The cage-free, and then a lot of people want to have the free range. And so by tracking where the food is. So this next piece is around fleet management, and maybe thinking, all right, animals, not vehicles. But there's a couple of reasons this is. So have vehicles that you use on the farms, yeah.
So real-time location tracking. So I utilized the management system where I was working, and works great in the big cities. Unless I hit West Texas, going from one city to the other, tracking temperature of my reefer trucks. Data. So he probably uses that to justify, well, my product is in temperature, so how do we fix that? Is that connectivity or is that sensor problem issue?
So it's one of your coverage, connectivity, and it's sort of storage and just being able to sort of catalog that. So one on the connectivity piece, I think the ELD sort of fleet management solution haven't had sort of really robust networks behind them. The modern fleet management systems they kind of moved from that 10-minute update time. You didn't necessarily know where that vehicle was or that access or that asset was, along with sort of the sensor components with sure voltage that's going on that vehicle. Now we're not seeing the same sort of, and there's so much sort of ubiquitous coverage that we're not seeing those same challenges. Or where we see sort of LTE gaps is where we're kind of filling that void with the LP-WAN solutions that we talked about, where maybe sort of private networks, if you have tens of thousands of acres that you can cover as you overlay essentially LTE service along with LoRa. It's a combination of the two, so you can provide connectivity in those dead areas.
Is that almost more costly?
It is because they're private too, so you own them. So it's like having a cellular network effectively that you can control and operate.
Kind of harder to implement it when you're making margins are really low and profits are.
Yeah, so you just cut the LTE component out of it entirely.
So thank you for bringing that up. That plays to the use case and highlights some of the challenges. Certainly, there have been advances. We're not gonna say all the problems have been fixed. Plenty of work that can be done, and then also with updates, things like the 5G that hasn't been rolled out yet. Tell me, you're the technical guy.
No, and we're seeing this sort of spectrum change too as 5G sort of gets wider adoption and more development. That's kind of opening up those lower RF spectrums, and through sort of the deployment infrastructure, the different cellular carriers, they're covering more and more territory. I'm hearing less and less about, hey, I have dead spots, right? But what we're seeing now is actually leveraging some of the LTE data. To kind of push back on carriers to identify those dead spots, sort of leveraging data that we're collecting for our own benefit, as well as kind of pushing back into SLA conversations where, hey, you guys need to adjust have those conversations with Tyson from a technical perspective. Say, hey, we're seeing this dead spot over here, or we want to augment this. So there's also kind of platforms that bring all of this together. So when I was talking about kind of marrying LTE and LoRa, there's platforms that kind of pull all of that together in one space, right? So that you have, hey, we have a gap here. Verizon's never going to cover it. There's just no coverage, period. But there may be coverage, half mile down the road. Just sort of get that connectivity there, and then backhaul that through like RF technical sort of connectivity back in the local field.
Good discussion. Thank you. So we talked about the GPS and the route tracking a little bit. The next piece is around safety and security. There are now integrated cameras that can go along with this, dash cameras. You may have seen it if you've taken a Lyft or an Uber recently. Some of the drivers have those that can capture information. Driver has some type of incident, capture information that incident was. And so have that insurance. It wasn't my fault. Now it's not just you saying that, you actually have the. The other big piece of this is around sensor integration. I talked a little bit earlier about sensors on equipment. So the same thing here. We've got sensors on the vehicles that now tell us things like engine light on, is a piece of this equipment not working? Not within the normal operating specifications, so you know what, that piece is probably going to need some. And so that can help move you from doing preventative maintenance on your vehicles, where maybe every year, where now you have data to tell you exactly what needs to be scheduled that before there's a equipment that fails on you right before harvest. The other piece here is, cold chain monitoring.
Plasma.
Cold chain monitoring. So the same type, there are sensors that integrate with these types of systems. So not only do you have the GPS data, but you can track it at this temperature, and you can even track along the route. You can see here was the temperature at this point along the route. It's very granular. The other piece here is around smart buildings. So lots of times you might think of a building like this, and what you can do to make a building like this. But you can also do this for buildings like, say, temperature, that is, making sure it's within the temperature that the chickens need. You make sure that you've got the right humidity for the.
How about a meat processing facility?
That might be kind of important.
But just our cold storage upstairs.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
cold
alarms
chain.
on. Well, it has alarms, but you have to be here to hear them.
And that's a great point. So when we think about connected buildings, it's not just the HVAC systems, the temperatures, the humidities, but you can also tie that in with things like alert systems, so that if it gets below a certain temperature or above a certain temperature, you can get notification. We can tie in with video surveillance, so that if it hits a certain temperature or specification with the building environment, then you start to record at that time what's going on. So maybe you can see if there's going on to that. The other piece is just around safety and security of the workers. So adding that video surveillance or potentially access control for the safety of the workers, but then also when you think about the product that you're providing for consumers, make sure that you're providing good quality product and that you control the environment and who has access to that product, so you don't have someone going on site and tampering with them.
One of the things on the video surveillance, and you kind of went to it, is that, we've got video surveillance, but I'm not going to sit and watch that for 24 hours a day. So what we're looking for is the deltas, the differences when things change. As you mentioned, someone comes in who's not supposed to be there, something happens. So, how do you, as far as those events, what kinds of things are out there to help us with that video? Let's say we have a camera on site. How do we make sure that thing can work to optimally for us?
So really, it's back to that sort of fundamental idea that if you think about all of this as just data, right? The big shift is the advancement of machine learning and pattern recognition. the challenge that you're kind of highlighting is how do I get that data from that environment and identify it. So I think when you really kind of think about IoT, the best way to think about it is a lab environment, right? Is that you kind of build out what you can think of as an innovation or lab ecosystem that you can start experimenting with. So just to take a use case up here is lighting. So Lisa covers education, K through 12 and higher ed, and we know that through some independent studies that the color of the light, the intensity of the light, the juxtaposition of ambient light as well as room light affects learning outcomes, right? There may be the same sort of dynamic in the poultry environment, right? Chickens lay more eggs under certain sort of light environments, right? So it's about sort of just initially kind of collecting data, being able to digest that data in a format that you can build some pattern recognition against it, and then that sort of leads into the predictive sort of outcomes, right? That's where we say, hey, there's a trend analysis. If we experiment here, we try this out. This doesn't behave the way we want. Quickly kind of fail fast is what we talk about, right? Kind of start, fail fast, identify another area to experiment with, see the outcomes of that, really turning us all into kind of data scientists from that perspective. It's all about that data ingestion, thinking about the different ways that we can think about the data that we're being collected. Again, I sort of just hypothesized, sort of egg production, but it may be something else, right? What's the effect of the pH water on some production output? So really, that's the challenge. Is we have all this data. There's not always that sort of immediate insight. It's the smart people in this room that are going to think, hey, what if I do this and a little bit of that? What's that outcome sort of achieve? How can I tie all this data that I'm collecting?
I think the challenge is the delivery of a product that's going to have reliability in the field. But I just sit back and think about this. Even though we are at a new time in history, ability to not only store data, process data, and all, and have the network, the internets, and cell phone capabilities and all that. But let's just take something really simple like an electronic scale where we can walk the animals on there and see what they weigh. Hey, we've been able to do that for 40 years. And so why doesn't everybody have an electronic scale? Because the products are not that good. Electronic products fail. So if you've just spent 48 hours gathering cattle to get them into pens, get them on the scale, your electronic scale don't work. Well, that's the most worthless piece of equipment in the world.
Yep.
If I got an old scale that's a bar and I can put 5 feed sacks on there and there's 250 pounds, I gotta say it works. That's the best technology. So I'm doing GPS work, thinking about monitors. There are some forms of agriculture where things work really well. The animals are confined, they're in buildings, that kind of thing. But when we go outside, right, there's just something about electronics with wind, rain, snow, manure, dirt, that electronic stuff fails. So I've been working in this area about 10 years trying to get intensive phenotypes from animals through electronics. And right now, we're still just at the barely, maybe we can do it phase. And I would say probably what hurts it more than anything is investment. When certain areas, if you're talking about Mr. Tyson and chicken production, right? I mean, yeah, they got huge dollars behind whatever they need to do, and they probably do have intensive electronic phenotyping already going on, but they're not going to tell us about it.
They're a customer of ours, we know they are.
Yeah, but and so why didn't that happen in like beef cattle, that kind of thing? Because we need things that are an investment of a few pennies to a few dollars. I mean, you just threw it out earlier, $30, $40. I'll tell you right now, it's a $30, $40 investment per head. It only a few special people who really kind of see the value of reducing my labor are going to invest in that. And they'll keep fixing that old pickup out there and rolling it up and down the road to go check water. That's just their mindset. So maybe we are at a point now, but if the product has to be, so developed that it's user friendly and it will not fail or not fail frequently in the field, or people are going to say, okay, where would I rather spend my time? Driving up and down the road looking at cows or trying to keep this electronic stuff working? And that's where, to me, it falls apart right there.
I don't think we're there. we're somewhere in the middle, right? And that's why we're out here and sort of talking to them. Is that's exactly it. We see that. So we generally, sort of digital transformation is a very disruptive thing. Talk about convergence and disruptive technology. So I'll kind of equate it back to something I'm a little more familiar with. So if you look at like phone systems 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? They were all analog, they were disconnected. Then there was this disruptive technology, which was voice over IP, sort of pulling that data onto IP networks. We're seeing that same sort of trend of convergence, IOT talked about, where the commoditization of electronics, the availability, and they're $30 today. They were $100 a year ago. They're probably going to be, a few dollars a couple of years from now. More of the thought process of how we approach our business and how do we build capabilities or think about the future capabilities. How do we experiment? And I'm not saying like in your case, you sort of whole herd needs it. That may be something that you go after over time, but initially it's what does a few of them look like? What data can we understand? And it may not be for everybody. Same thing in enterprise. I'll have a conversation with one manufacturer one day, and they're like, "Hey, I don't care. I'll do it all the manual way. I just don't want to sort of introduce anything new." And other companies, sort of manufacturing companies, realize that if they don't start investing and thinking about how this might disrupt their own business, how it's going to change, the way they price products, the predictive sort of analytics that we can drive out of machine learning now. Prices based on markets, based on weather outside. We see it in manufacturing. A quick example is Kellogg making Pop-Tarts. They identified if there is a tropical depression or a hurricane, that there is a run on strawberry Pop-Tarts. Not all Pop-Tarts, strawberry Pop-Tarts, right? That is something that they can plan for as they see sort of weather conditions move in. That they can sort of address their manufacturing, ramp up production of these, get these into the distribution outlets, and get them out in the quicker. So I do hear you from an availability standpoint, but I think you're going to see these as much more commoditized endpoint. The endpoint pieces being much more commoditized and essentially throwaway over time. Start talking about RFID, we're talking about 5 cents a sensor, not third, right? Sort of a full GPS. Solution like this MooCal, right, is in that $30 space, but that you don't need that. You can track RTLS 5 cents. Go on, poultry, agriculture, product, assets, whether it's food stock or whatnot, right? Anything you can throw a label on for a couple cents, and they don't break. I mean, they're just RF actuated. There's no batteries in them.
So that being said, though, do you represent yourself? Do you represent the technology? To me, the piece that's missing is the company that puts the technology into a package that sells it. That's the piece that's missing.
So that's what CDW does. So we weren't sort of trying to provide a CDW pitch. But that's really us, and I'll get you. Is that so? We partner with I think the last number I heard was 1,800. We have this massive sort of ecosystem of partners from IBM to Microsoft. Then we have a deep talent pool of integration experts. Talk about sort of RF engineering space. And then we have a consultative sort of approach with our customers. What is that business outcome you're trying to achieve? Hey, maybe I wanted to change my driver behavior. I keep having high insurance claims. Get those adjusted quick enough. Crop production, whatever that is. What is that outcome you're trying to achieve? And aligning sort of technology that feeds into that, and with an eye on what matters to them. Is it cost? Is it highly available? Look like. Does that answer your question? Good.
Yeah, it's tough. This is hard.
It's tough.
It's not as easy as we have these great technologies. We're just going to start playing.
I will assure you. Slide
Let me just give you an example. You brought up the bad cattle season. That was December 23rd, 2003. And that shut the cattle market down for a good 30 days, might have been 60. And you're talking about billions upon billions of dollars. And you would have thought that would have been enough scare that we just said, in the United States, we're going to go to an animal tracking system. Guess what? It didn't happen. right? Even with all this technology, you still hadn't happened.
Well,
I
a
mean,
lot of that
and
is, a lot of that is resistance of the people who have the cattle. I mean, cause I remember that incident, and we actually had we were trying to go out and do premises registration, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And there were guns pulled out to get off my ranch. I mean, so there's a cultural thing. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah, and in federal regulation, we talked about FISMA. That's not all that popular in some, right? I mean, it's cutting into margins, but sometimes that's where government fits in, right? They have to make those. And that's the trend that we're seeing. Our food stuff.
That's not just from the federal government, that's from the customers, the clients.
The whole.
You look at an Amazon buying, when they're very much into the data environment, and they'll want to know what the traceability of that food is all along the path.
Absolutely.
More so than, if it's just
From like a retail restaurant operations conversations I'm having with commercial business, they're trying to figure out how to boil that data up into the menu. That when you're like, hey, I want to potentially out, but how do I know that this particular meal, what's included, allergic to, what is the history of this, what does that look like, how do we boil that data up? And so there's awareness from the commercial side that the customers, the end customers, consumers are wanting this data. What we're seeing is this is a market that is kind of primed up the need to facilitate sort of that upstream dissemination. So it may not always be at the supplier's, interest, right? But there's going to be some sort of catalyst to kind of push them and move into space they haven't.
A lot of our big meats people left, so we're gonna put it all on you. But it's just very interesting. I'm just trying to be a devil's advocate, so we go forward, because I've sat in so many of these meetings and nothing happens. As I age in my career, I'm getting frustrated by going to meetings where nothing happens afterwards.
And we'll get
We live
to,
right here in Colorado.
Well,
All right,
so far
So let me
we-
just throw this out at you.
Go
So
ahead.
people come to visit Animal Science World, they come from the outside, and they start talking about food traceability and all that. And that's true, no doubt. Chipotle and people in menu specificity and all that kind of thing. But in reality, and I'm not a meat science guy, I'm a geneticist. That's always a small part of the total business, even though it's grown tremendously. And the outside world says, this is so logical, this is what you guys ought to do. No, it's a huge commodity-based business where animals change hands from owner to owner. And we've been able to do like camera scoring of carcasses now. I've been hearing about that most of my 20-year career in animal science. But we still have no system that takes that camera data and gets it back to the geneticist that we can use that data. It's really difficult. So I think you got to walk before you run. And the way I see it is like there are two kind of major areas. There is kind of that tracking the animals from system to system and following food from the processor to the store and all that. There's that. But then there's also a land management. That's the part of monitoring your wells and even rangeland monitoring. That's the Ranchers Plus in the West, where we have so much public lands. It's also the agencies, the BLM, the Forest Service, and those kind of folks. Everybody can greatly benefit from that. The challenge in all that, though, is it seems like, if you throw out the word Tyson, man, if they can shave a penny of savings somewhere, they will do it because they have the investment to do that. When you start spreading the dollars over so many people and businesses, it just falls apart quickly. And so generally in animal science, like we have this grow safe system out at, if you haven't been out there, you got to go out there and see that. Our feed intake monitoring unit out at Ardent. I mean, generally in the animal science world, it's like some little bitty company somehow begs somebody enough dollars to get this little product on the market. It's a total different world. And I think you got to understand that. I think this is cool and we should be working together, but it's not the value of one app that could go on 1 billion cell phones. That just doesn't happen in animal agriculture. Not in the beef side. It does more on poultry, pigs, and maybe somewhat dairy. It's just where this technology could help us the most is the least amount of money to go into it. But I'm just telling you, it just kind of stops right here at this conversation. Because right now I would not know where to go get I've got all kinds of ideas. I could fill this board with ideas of how we could apply this technology.
Okay.
But where to go get the money to get all this to go forward? Now, I don't have a clue where to get that money.
It's a great conversation to have. Love to be a part of it because I love the ideation. That's the part that we lack, and I know there's kind of like to kind of hit this before, but we obviously don't know your industry as well as you ever will, right? But sort of your insights coupled with our understanding of technology and sort of business ability to sort of justify that ROI and show and predict kind of where we see there justify whether it's cost reduction strategies or new kind of top line revenue opportunities. That's what Lisa and I are focused on. There's a whole mountain of engineering resources we have in the bag. Our real job is to kind of pull those technical resources together to drive out that business justification for technology.
Let's take your question, and then I'll proceed to, like, these are the ideas, and I'll proceed to, okay, how do we actually make it happen? And what's our methodology to help you get from great ideas to actually doing something in the real world?
Okay, so I actually had this question about that day over the summer. That caught me off guard, so I'm curious what you're doing. So you use the term fail-fast systems. Fail-fast mentality. So you're talking like the Y Combinator, like figure out in 6 months whether your company's good or not, have 6 prototypes. That's like the deal.
Absolutely.
So like, that's like the real benefit of machine learning is it's highly adaptive, it's slight tweaks to it. But and that works great, I guess, in the ag setting where it's like daily management. But I'm a crop farmer. I put seed into a field. I got months before I have a clue what an end product is. I put sow. I've got a year, so I know what like most important outcome metrics are. If it's a cow, it's almost 2 or more before I know what the outcome is. Which, like, how do you argue for the value of that type of system in like long-term planning versus something that's supposed to be optimized with like very rapid elite?
I don't have a good answer for it. I do think it is an opportunity for the university, though, because you have all these sort of contacts in these different spaces to start kind of collecting data for research to understand that, right, kind of help somebody through some of the decision-making process. But it's a good observation. I don't have a good answer to it. But it's definitely one that we sit back and kind of churn on and think about. I hadn't sort of thought about, the life cycle of the products that you're looking at. We think of, I spend most of my time on commercial business. Manufacturing is pretty concrete, right? We got to put X, Y, and Z together, kind of know the timetables. Obviously much different in livestock.
That's a really good point, and that's part of the reason that we're here and why Ed asked us. University can be involved in some types of projects and some of these types of technologies is about what we might be able to do in the agriculture space and to figure it out here. And test some things, run some pilots, try it out here, and then figure out what actually works, what actually helps in the real world where we're in the physical environment and do the electronics work in this particular space like we think they should, and find those best practices and then roll those out at a grander scale to in the field that are just trying to get their livestock and do their business every day. So we can sit here and relay those best practices. So next I'll go into how do we actually get from idea to starting to get this in the real. So both IoT and digital transformation. From the conversation that we've had here, they're complex. There's a lot of different pieces that go in. It starts with what are we trying to achieve? What kind of sensors or equipment? The equipment is already out there. What new pieces might be needed, whether that's sensors or analytics platform. leverage things like cloud technology. Talking about agriculture here, people aren't going to like build out a huge data center to figure out how to process this data, how to leverage the cloud to just get the processing power for us instead of having to hire an IT person to take care of managing the data. And it doesn't work in this space. Other pieces to factor in is how do we secure that data? How do we get this set up? And then how do we maintain the technology? Or can we get someone to maintain their business of livestock? So this is a model that CDW uses. It's the IoT reference model. This is a standard across the industry that we use to just kind of map this out. There are so many changes happening in this space that we work off of this reference model to try to future-proof kind of investments customers make now. So whether that's new sensors coming out, we factor in the edge compute. That's something David talked about, where you get the data and do the compute where the data is, and then maybe only send notifications or send the data over the network if there's a change that happens. And it goes all the way up to, at the top level, collaboration and practices. So now that we have the data, we have the insights, how is that going to change the way farming business? How are we going to change that based off of this data? So that's where David and I come in. That's why we're here. Is because there are so many different W's invested in our team to help coordinate all of these different technology, because it really ties into not only networking, but cloud and security and storage of this data. And we're here to really orchestrate all those different pieces. So as he mentioned, there's so many different manufacturers, so many different companies, or so-and-so whose brother designed this product that can do this. So there's all kinds of different manufacturers and products out there. And we're here to figure out what pieces to pull together to get the end outcome that you're looking for, trying to solve for. So, when I say like we haven't really prepared details about the technology, that's because it depends on the specific use case that we're trying to solve and the actual location that we're trying to solve it. So we may get into a solution, and in one location, this is the right setup, and we go, 10 miles down the street or 50 miles down the street, and it's a totally different setup just because of the environment that we're in. And so that's what David and I are here for, is take into account all those variables, figure out how to make it work. So this is the one that David stole my thunder on. So really, on the left-hand side, we're not agricultural experts. We're not going to pretend culture. That's what we're looking to do, is your expert. What are those specific challenges, the real world, where we have dirt and manure and weather and all kinds of challenges like that, and also some of the cultural challenges. So if I've got something that works and I've been doing this for the last 30 years, do I really want to change that? Well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe something we need to factor in is the next generation of farmer. How are they going to operate? And that's the type of expertise that I'm on you for. And then CDW brings to the table our expertise, IoT, technology around that, the hardware, the software, the implementation, and our huge network of partners, all the different manufacturers of sensors, or how to connect those sensors, or how to work with the data carriers, or to provide management of those solutions once they're in place. So really true digital transformation happens when we come together. Work challenges now. So one of the ways that we do this is through what CDW calls an envisioning workshop. Forward of how to take some of these ideas and put them into reality. This is really what I'd recommend as a next step. Is we come back and for a half day or a full day, sit down and really talk about, okay, let's pick a couple priorities, 3, 4 like issues that you want to focus on. And we'll talk through what are some of those challenges around the issues, what's currently being used, and we'll actually help build out a roadmap for some different projects that implement some of these technologies. And as we go through this process, as we build out this roadmap, one of the things that we factor in is maybe the sensors are $30 right now, and we think in a couple of years they'll be down to $1 or $2. Okay, well, maybe that's a project we attack in 2 years instead of right now. And that's we'll factor in things like that, and also what are your priorities? What's going to give you a quick ROI or something that can be rolled out with existing technology pretty quickly. So we'll help you map all of that out. So really when it comes down to it, I alluded to this earlier, these types of solutions aren't something where we can just say, here's the IoT widget, go buy it and it'll be the greatest thing ever. Because it really does need to be very customized because environment, your specific application is going. So we come in, we'll talk to you about the specific use case, and we'll work with you to figure out how to put it all together. That's the end of my presentation.
So you talk about the envisioning workshop. I mean, the group when us happened, interested in something like that out of this group? Thank you. And I can certainly facilitate or help try to coordinate that and get. I mean, Milt's exactly right. I think that. And I've heard him talk to me several times about it. I mean, he understands the technology too, sure. But he understands the challenges, which are huge.
Oh, yeah.
Because
absolutely.
The margins, as was identified, are so small. I mean, it's not like, a few cents means a big difference, especially when you're talking about.
Well, I'm sure every client wants that margin to be as small as possible. That's part of it. Where I'm really uncomfortable about this whole conversation, though, is CDW just providing the service to put this together? Or does CDW want to invest? Or do we need to find an investor that's outside of this group here that comes in and wants to provide funding to develop something? That's the part I'm not clear about.
So what we can do, we don't make anything. We don't make the widgets. We also, we're not an investing company. So I don't think we could give any type of solution. But what we can do is we can help you figure out what the solutions might be, all the pieces that's really where we fit in to play, is what it is you're trying to achieve, and then helping you pull the pieces. Yeah, and as far as where the investment dollars are, that's certainly something that you probably know much better than I, as far as what dollars are out there, government subsidies and that type of thing. I'm not sure on that.
Mentioned familiarity of a drone taking a picture of the and the color. There's validates those. And we can do the analyticals and stuff. Validates that that's native or what's penny to the farmer. The science goes behind it besides numbers, political numbers. And so,
In the case of mine, it's a commercial grower, so I mean they're just seeing it in. We're sort of adjusting irrigation again to kind of look at how that changes. Again, not data that I would understand, right? But essentially how that changes sort of their crop production.
there's a third party that does it.
Well, we're providing the data. We're providing the insights. They're making the decision whether it's worth their continued investment to continue out on it. So we're seeing the change, right? From an analytical point of view, we're seeing that, hey, input X, achieve that Y. We're providing that contextualization. The continued investment is them sort of looking at, hey, does this really make sense to expand that out of this pilot environment?
Really, one of the technical stuff that I think comes up in ag. You get sidekick or the TensorFlow package on Python or like anything out loud, like take a weekend. Software super. Like so, most of those are made your own, like hundreds of thousands of images, like to train them. If I was doing like crowd detection, there's open source massive data sets that people will train stuff on. I don't have that in ag. So if you talk to the sensor companies, this was talking to people about smart ag conferences in Kentucky this past summer. Almost none of the sensor companies want to give you access to their aggregated database because they don't want you to reverse engineer their algorithms. Yeah. And they're right to be paranoid. Other end, the farmers don't really want to aggregate all of that type of data together. So if the repeat got hold of it, they can cause all sorts of chaos. So that leaves us with generating themselves. On research level, I might generate 100 gigs of terabyte of data off a cow. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for me to get above a couple hundred cows on this stuff. Definitely hard to get more than one farm at a time. So it makes it really, I might be able to get some insight on a larger farm. You might be able to get some interesting insights. We got a lot of problems with robustness if you're trying to get something to, okay, like ranchers in Colorado, here's something that's validated for any of you guys. And if you're on, if you're small on the production side, like, if I've got 10,000 cows because I'm a huge ranch, then yeah, I might be able to self-implement. But if I've only got 60 head of cattle, and I'm only getting one pump of cattle here, like.
No, it's not unique to agriculture either, right? So I think that's the general challenge in a lot of this is the existing data sets, right? We just haven't developed that investment curve to insight capability and execution is kind of the challenge, right? And that's why we encourage, it sounds salesy and it's not the intent, right? But to sort of start early, start gathering that data. You talked about like plant production, right? You don't have that model of what that looks like over time. You have to start somewhere. You have to develop a baseline. You have to invest in there. Convincing people to invest in that space can be challenging, right? But that's not unique. I think as technology sort of gets further adoption, smart people get acclimated to this space. We see that data set expand, right? Because we're going to move from, hey, this is affecting the OEE and manufacturing environment. How does that trickle down into heavy assets in agriculture? We're going to see these data sets evolve. They're just not there yet. That's why we encourage for invest now. Start small. Don't try to bite off a project that doesn't make sense. Start small. Gather some data. Try to fail quickly. And, you talked about sort of, how I was sitting here kind of pondering that conversation. How do you look at that data set over time? You have to start somewhere. You have to build a baseline. You can use some machine learning to kind of gauge what that curve may look like. There's no way to do that until you have more and more data, right? Which requires investment, time. Yeah, you have to start. You is metaphorical. We all have to start, right? We all have to kind of come together, right? We know the benefits are there, because in the spaces where there is data, proven ROI on this. That's why companies are investing so heavy. Where that 11 to 14 trillion dollars of driven from is optimization. That's what's driving all that, and that's real. We see it real in other spaces. I'm not seeing it in agriculture yet, but it's primed up. You can just where we get that investment. That's a good question.
So I'm just talking out loud. I'm saying
Yeah,
this.
please.
It's sitting next to me, so I'm saying
Yeah.
everybody else can hear too. So our dean, Jay Menon, supposed to be the guru of all business and business here at CSU. But why aren't we saying, hey, Jay Menon, there's a real hurdle in this whole discussion, that's the investor. Who could that be? I mean, that's what I'm saying. A lot of the electronic kind of tools that we have in animal ag, I think a lot of those came because a couple people, man, they just wanted to get it done. And they just somehow, and so like the feed intake unit we have out there is the Grow Safe company. And there's only a couple other companies globally that have anything close to that. And it's because those people said, I want to do this. And they didn't really look at it as I'm going to get rich at it. For some reason, they took it upon themselves and they did it. Before that, it was a Kalen Gate system. Some guy in Pennsylvania, he wanted to do it and he worked until he got it to work. And then, out of the goodness of his heart, flew around the country and helped people keep their system running. And that's how it's been. Yeah, that piece is just, to me, that's the missing piece. We got to have some people come to the table and say, I'd be willing to invest in this, or it's just us talking, because right now I don't know where, like Australian and New Zealanders are I'd say much more advanced kind of in this animal monitoring system. And most of their investment did come from, their governments, their livestock systems, Meat and Livestock Australia, what they call Ag New Zealand. They put more money into it. USDA really, maybe we could get some money there. Western State, we're talking about a few $100,000. We're not talking about $2 million that makes a product that service, large. We need this piece.
And it's key. And we're seeing, I don't have the answer, but I will say that I'm encouraged by, I'm seeing more public-private, private-private relationships. Even like if you kind of in the sense of brainstorming, right? We talked about these LoRa kind of private networks have this capability. There's the ability to sort of sell that real estate. You have this asset, this fixed asset out there. Sell some of the services because there's trucks that are flying by these spaces that need data or connectivity. And so I see opportunity for businesses, public institutions to partner in different things. We're seeing connected roadways. Colorado, in conversations now, we're going to connecting up all of the freeways. It's driven into emergency response and other aspects that, they're focused on, but that infrastructure bill has the potential to maybe pull in some of this data ways, right? So it's a lot of bridge building. I don't have all the answers, but those are conversations since we can help broker, make some introductions too. And I'm happy to, like I said, we do a lot of business with state and local entities. There may be some interest in there. Some data set that makes this valuable. And physical security, kind of video surveillance piece, may be a prime example. Instead of you having to worry about getting a camera out on a light pole, there may be one as part of a public offering, right? Or they're using it for license plate recognition. information. But if we have those sensors in the field, there may be data that we can extract and publish.
Any other questions here? I want to thank Lisa and David for showing up, for coming and providing some great information. I hope we've been able to provide you. I mean,
Yeah, it's been good for
great
us.
scientists here. And I think, Milt, to address your question, I think we need to move this forward. I agree. And what I would like to do is, I'd like to take the action items forward as far as reach out to you, particularly back with the PIs, but let's talk about next steps, what we can do, what the next steps might be for us. Else? Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.